We're going to jump right back into it with our next panel, which is Securing Future of Work, Combating the Rapid Rise of Insider Threats, led by Prasad Parthasarathi. So Prasad is the cybersecurity domain lead for Cisco Investments in Corporate Development. He's led several acquisitions, including CloudLock, Observable Networks, and Landcoat, and most notably Duo for $2.4 billion. His investment focus is on future-proof architectures, and that includes identity and zero trust, DevSecOps, data privacy and security, SASE, and next-gen SOC. So when I actually asked Prasad where his passion for cybersecurity came from, he said that it most likely came from his fixation on Jason Bourne when he was a little kid. He said that he just couldn't get enough of all of the novels and films. Quick reminder, again, if you just have any questions or comments or thoughts, make sure to drop those into the chat window. We're standing by, happy to answer them. So with that, I'm going to hand it off to Prasad.
Hi, everyone. This is Prasad Parthasarathi. I lead the cybersecurity venture investments and M&A platform here at Cisco. Cisco Investments has been a super active investor and acquirer in the cybersecurity space. Our venture investments straddle best-in-class companies across Silicon Valley, New York, Europe, Israel, and recently even APJ. So we really have established global tentacles to identify best-in-class security entrepreneurs and minds. We are super excited about security, and we are super excited about the posture that Cisco security can play in securing future of work. And I'm very excited to introduce a panel of cybersecurity leaders whose viewpoint and expertise I've really come to appreciate and admire over the last few years. I'll request them to quickly introduce themselves, but the panel is made up of Bret Hartman, who is the CTO of our security business group, and then senior executives from our two poster child portfolio companies, Illusive Security, which is providing a disruptive deception-based technology platform, and then Tom Hofmann from Flashpoint, which is doing phenomenal work in the space of deep and dark web mining, as well as threat intelligence forensics. With that, I will quickly turn it over to Bret, Ofer, and Tom to briefly introduce themselves and what they're excited about.
Thank you, Prasad. So I'm Bret Hartman. I'm CTO of security at Cisco. And so I'm in my job responsible for defining really the future security technology directions for the company. I do spend a lot of time on the job, typically on the road, meeting with CIOs and CISOs. I haven't been doing a whole lot of flying lately, but those virtual meetings, fortunately, still do continue. And I'm really looking forward in this panel to just share some thoughts of what I'm seeing out there with respect to secure remote workforce and really these further trends. Thanks.
Hi, everyone. I'm Ofer Israeli. I'm the founder and CEO of Illusive. We started Illusive a good few years ago to kind of rethink security from advanced attacks perspectives and how we could go about stopping these devastating attacks that hit our headlines all too often. Like Bret, I'm getting accustomed to not being on a plane day in, day out, which is interesting in its own right, and super excited for the discussion today.
Hi, this is Tom Hoffman. Thanks, Prasad, for hosting us. I'm the Vice President of Intelligence at Flashpoint. We are a risk intelligence firm, and yes, we do operate in a lot of different illicit communities. We run a globally dispersed collection system to really index what's happening in a lot of these communities. And we're really focused in on exposing some of these threats that organizations face outside of their networks. So we are always busy, and unfortunately the last couple of months have just brought a new series of threats that we're helping our clients help to understand, and looking forward to talking through that here today.
Awesome. Super excited to have each one of you on the panel. And we have a very rich discussion guide to facilitate a good conversation over the next 40 minutes or so. So every now and then I'll turn to my guide to really keep us on track. But maybe just to, I guess, kick things off, I'll request Bret to share his thoughts, and then Ofer and Tom, please come in. But Bret, it appears that over the last couple of months, this transition to remote work just got significantly accelerated. We were always thinking about collaboration, whiteboarding, and future of work, but it felt more like a 5-year journey. And it feels like that 5-year journey got compressed into, call it 2 to 3 weeks. So what are the challenges that enterprises are really facing in absorbing this accelerated transition?
Yeah, that's absolutely true, Prasad. It definitely did. I mean, I talk a lot about in my job. It's about predicting the future, right? And that's not so easy. How difficult it is, and I mean, to the point of this pandemic, of course, nobody saw this coming, right? Nobody. I mean, totally took everybody off guard. On the other hand, there has been a lot of discussion for the last couple of years around distributed workforce, digital transformation. These are trends about people working from home and hotels and everywhere. That's been going on a long time. And to your point, what clearly has happened with this pandemic is accelerating this trend. All of a sudden, people had to shift overnight to really focus around secure remote worker. And as people's almost entire workforce shifted to this model. There are some basic underlying technology trends that are around this. I mean, one is around journey to the cloud, right? The fact that people have to move infrastructure from on-prem to the cloud. Another is around zero trust, establishing security from users to the cloud. Another big one is, VPNs. VPNs are incredibly critical. And just in general, having way more decentralized infrastructure than companies were used to just a few months ago. I'll just say just as I think about this and as I think about the challenge in particular as organizations move in this direction, is it's really, really easy for people to let their guard down. They're not leveraging all this corporate infrastructure anymore, right? We're, sitting behind our home routers and the like. And this, less of this insight and oversight, I should say, and less of leveraging corporate infrastructure means that probably those employees are going to be less focused on their security concerns, and that definitely opens up some issues.
That was a great context. Ofer and Tom, any further thoughts to what just Bret touched on?
Yeah, I think taking off from Bret's comment there in regards to letting our guard down, taking a step back, I think first of all, it's truly phenomenal what's happened. If we had surveyed, various corporations around the globe 4 months ago and told them, what do you think will happen if everybody suddenly shuts down offices worldwide overnight? How is the world going to react to it? I don't think anybody would have thought that it would be supposedly as seamless as it's been. I think there would be a lot more concern. I think we were surprised in a good way that it actually worked. So that's a good start and a very positive start. From a security standpoint, however, I think there's also some euphoria that comes alongside it. And I think that we've seen that it works. We've seen not only are we able to operate the business, but you know what? It's actually quite productive because we're not spending time in front of TSA and we're doing more Zoom meetings and whatever the case may be. So it's actually working. But at
WebEx
the same
meetings,
time,
Ofer. We're doing more WebEx meetings.
That's right. Prasad, thank you for correcting me there. Having said that, I think that during the same time that attackers have been investing very heavily to think about what this means as the next phase. And, a colleague of mine says that, and now it's Christmas and New Year's Eve together, right? From an attacker standpoint, everybody is working from home. That attack surface is huge. There's a lot more ways to access people and so on, and people's guards are down. So I think what we're about to see is a new wave of attacks that's changed and taken advantage of the situation. We really need to get in front of that because it's coming.
Yeah, Bret, I think he really hit on a key point of what we're seeing, which is really that focus in on how do you operate your security posture when a lot of your employees are working from home and they're on their own networks and their kids are watching Netflix while you're trying to Zoom your WebEx video. So we're seeing some of the infrastructure load put on there. And we're also seeing that organizations weren't necessarily fully prepared for a full remote workforce. And even some of the approval processes, like how you get different documents signed that had to be in person, now all of a sudden have to be done over the internet. And we're seeing a lot of threat actors understand this, and they're increasing their phishing campaigns, the spear phishing. They know that these companies are having to rework their security postures on the fly. So we see a lot of individuals, threat actors really looking at those individual employees and looking for where their exposure is. And unfortunately, we also see that while there's been a lot of investment from corporations over the past couple decades on securing the corporate environments, extending that umbrella now to the home is one of these new things that we need to start thinking about. Now that employees are operating off their home networks, and now what is running on their networks and any malware that might be on there could inadvertently have some impact on the corporate environment as well.
That is super helpful context. I think this really sets us up well for the next few topics. And Ofer, I want to come to you first, and I want you to take this in a positive light, Ofer. So one criticism I have about the security industry is that many platforms, be it Cisco or I would say many startups also, at every RSA conference, there are two things we do really well. One is create this feeling of dread and draconian scenario, and two, promise a silver bullet. That's something that we all do. We're all guilty of doing at different points in time. However, what you just articulated, Ofer, resonates loudly with what we are hearing from other customers also. A lot of CISOs are advocating that the number one priority that they have right now is insider attack and rogue insiders. So, Ofer, would love to get your perspective. You mentioned that right now it's Christmas and Hanukkah or New Year coming together for attackers. So what has created a fertile ground for malicious insiders, or even I would say benign insiders, to become a CISO's nightmare? Would love to start with you, Ofer.
Yeah, absolutely. I think this is from an insider threat perspective, especially perilous time. When you think about it, it's really for three reasons. Number one, from a financial aspect. So, we all read the news. People are losing their jobs. There's many other companies that are going to cut jobs. Some people are getting concerned. Financial strain naturally leads to some people tipping over to the wrong side of the fence. So that's a clear one. And we've seen that happen, in previous crises, right? You think about the 2008 crisis, a huge spike in surge in insiders. This unemployment is way larger than that. There's no reason we wouldn't see the same here. The other couple aspects which are quite interesting and unique here are the emotional aspect of it and just the opportunistic aspect of it. And from an emotional standpoint, when you think about all of us, again, overnight, moving to work from home, that naturally leads to some level of detachment from the company, right? We no longer see our coworkers on a day-to-day basis. We don't necessarily share coffee, or if we do over a virtual coffee, it's not quite the same. We don't have our happy hours and so on and so forth. And that in its own right causes some distance between the employee and the company, which naturally, if somebody's on the fence, it may lead him to choose the dark route. Finally, from an opportunistic standpoint, you think about being an insider. It's not that easy, right? Or if I'm sitting at work and maybe I'm in my cubicle and I'm going to do some bad stuff, well, I don't know when people are walking behind me and maybe peering over my shoulder and seeing what's on my screen. It's quite distressful in its own right. Now, these same people are tucked away in their basement. Nobody's peering over their shoulder. Practically, and also it gets them into a state of mind that nobody sees what they're doing. Everything around it from a connectivity standpoint is somewhat of a chaos. So there's a great opportunity to operate in that realm. So I think when you combine these three things, the financial, emotional, and opportunistic standpoints, it leads to a huge surge of insiders that rightfully so CISOs are concerned about these days.
As Ofer pointed out, I mean, the challenges in terms of that lack of oversight, that lack of visibility is really the first concern that I hear. That typically, again, because in these environments, all that investment of corporate infrastructure that's back in the office isn't necessarily getting leveraged to be able to monitor employees for appropriate behavior. Again, you got to be careful about this balance. But what's happened and what CISOs are thinking a lot about is how do they get that back, right? How do you get better visibility and better awareness of those users and their behavior so you can prevent some of those bad things that Ofer was talking about?
Makes a lot of sense. And I would say these first couple of topics have really provided a great context in which to discuss future of work, because we now know what the new environment looks like. It's remote from home, and the switch got turned on overnight. CISOs have got a new set of priorities. So Tom, it's a great point for you to come in and provide a flashpoint point of view and how you are basically solving the problem that our customers are facing when it comes to securing future of work solutions. I mean, we've all heard of Zoom bombing. WebEx is awesome. Nothing ever happens to WebEx. We've heard of Slack bombing, Zoom bombing. So Tom, would love to understand.
We've got the secure platform, so that's
you got it. Very objectively. So Tom, I would love to hear how you're leveraging deep and dark web, threat intel, and also curious to hear about the new exciting platform of account takeover protection that you guys have launched.
Yeah, great question. This definitely, I think, brings it all together. Unfortunately, there is a lot of stolen information that is passed back and forth within a lot of these illicit communities. The good news is a lot of it is recycled, repackaged, and resold. So if you have good insights into what's already been stolen, you can help to start put additional protections in place and actually alert employees that the password they've used 10 different times, it's time to stop using that password. It was interesting while the Zoom bombing was taking off, a lot of that was actually coming from passwords that had been stolen many times before, and it was threat actors were using these tools, which were account checkers that were just using already stolen credentials and just rotating through to see what was still there. So when we looked at actually a lot of the headlines that were grabbed about all these Zoom credentials being stolen, we found that over 90% of those credentials were already discovered before and processed before. Just for some context, the credential system that we are sitting on and we help clients really understand this, it has 34 billion username and password pairs within there. And a lot of those are repeats. There's about 6 billion unique entries in there, but it just underscores just how quickly these passwords are obtained, how quickly they can be stolen. There are underground economies that automate a lot of how these are resold, repackaged, and put into account checkers. So this is one where you can really help your organization as this data is being stolen. We can give insights into when it's been stolen before it ever gets into being used for malicious activities. So it's just yet another interesting insight into how these threat actors look at really how people are using technology, and they're looking at the easy ways in which they can bypass all of the security protections that are in place. And unfortunately, the passwords still continue to be one of those easy pathways.
Got it. And let's just stay with this important point for a minute, Tom, and I would love for Bret also to come in. But the breach that we've experienced with Zoom, that's been on a scale that we never even imagined. So I guess the interesting question is, what causes breach in the first place? Is it lack of basic security hygiene in the platform, or is it the fact that you're dealing with fundamentally new styles of actors and truly new zero-day attacks? Would love to get a sense for what's the nature of these attacks that are happening with communications platforms. So maybe, Tom, you can continue from where you left off, and then Bret, would love to get your CTO lens into this.
The predominance where we see a lot of the breaches coming in, it is more and more going after those third-party vendors. It is looking for those parts of your supply chain who do not have the robust security defenses, do not have the teams there that are able to really do the needed monitoring to keep themselves safe. And the simple things like RDP accesses, we see there are entire underground markets that just run botnets that look for these RDP ports, and then they run those brute forcer tools. And it's simple things that we tell people. It's use complex passwords, multi-factor authentication. Like, these are the basic things that can prevent a lot of this. But we are seeing that this is still a very ripe ground where threat actors are getting in, and they really have broken this up, where there's actors that run the botnets, and they take what they've stolen and they take it to people who run the shops, and then there are ransomware groups that go to these shops, and this is where they acquire some of their accesses to deploy the ransomware. So it really is the basic hygiene that you mentioned is so critical that could help us really prevent many of these attacks that we're seeing today.
Yeah, so picking up on that, Tom made several really important points there. First of all, glad you mentioned multi-factor authentication, because I mean, you know, we have a little bit to say about that. I mean, with the Duo offering, to me, that's like table stakes these days. Anybody that has corporate services that only require a password for authentication, that's crazy these days, right? As you know, there's just the example you gave of the massive repositories of those passwords is just good hygiene. The very basics is strong authentication, multi-factor, which is widely available. I think the other point you make that's critical is recognizing that in this distributed workforce we're talking about, it's not just employees. It's this massive ecosystem of partners and suppliers that all have to work together. And it makes it really complicated to determine who do you trust, how do you authenticate when you have all these different organizations working together. And oftentimes it's that complexity of that bigger ecosystem that opens up the holes for somebody to sneak through, right? When you have this, you know, lots of different stakeholders.
Awesome. I think that's a very, I would say, prescriptive set of ideas there. Ofer, I want to come to you next. So we've spoken about future of work encompassing distributed nodes, really heterogeneous traffic, and frankly, being able to secure branch offices of one. I mean, home is a new enterprise. I mean, Prasad here represents a branch of one that needs to be secured, and I deserve the same enterprise security that I would get when I'm sitting inside the office. So in this distributed environment, how do you position the value prop of Illusive? Obviously, you've built this really awesome deception platform to secure both network and endpoint. How do you see that translating to this heterogeneous environment where a lot of the assets and applications are much more remote now?
Yeah, so when you think about the deception portion of what we do, which is a big portion of Illusive's offering, what that's around is really high fidelity detection that is deterministic and not probabilistic, right? I think in this new work environment, that becomes probably tenfold more important. And the reason being, Bret made a comment earlier, if I have a number of behavioral models and systems and such to track types of behavior, whether it's for insiders or external threat actors who are within, well, many of these aren't routed through the corporate network these days, right? On the one side. And on the second side, you think about behavioral models, they need some level of baselining and knowledge as per what's actually happening to say what deviates from that. And as we all know, our lives have changed 1,000 times over every week, basically, since the pandemic hit, right?
So we're defining a new normal every day.
Exactly. Defining a new normal, or one could claim there is no normal, and let's save the time in defining it, right? But the point is that the fact that things are changing so rapidly, we can't rely on yesterday's patterns to say what today looks suspicious, right? And so deterministic detection of malicious stuff that's happening becomes tenfold more important. I think that's exactly where deception plays a great role, because it basically the only signal you would get upon a deception entity being utilized is by a threat actor. It does not rely on everybody interacts with it and in some way or some other form. So we're definitely seeing this resonating pretty strongly and helping a lot of our customers out, especially these days. I would also like to follow on to the comment earlier. I couldn't agree more with Tom's and Bret's comments in regards to the basic fundamental cyber hygiene that companies aren't following, and then many times are surprised of why are they in the headlines. And a lot of it can be fixed pretty easily. Not it's not a no-brainer, but a huge chunk of it can be utilized pretty easily. As Bret mentioned, Duo, multi-factor authentication, right? Great, that levels up your ability, or the attacker's ability to get credentials and utilize them for malicious intents. A huge portion that we're investing very heavily in is what we call attack surface manager, which exactly uncovers, some of those fundamental hygiene issues. And my advice to the people that we have with us here is we're finding lots and lots and lots of examples of just basic hygiene things that you can do that will take you, 9/10 of the way there. Then there's an additional really complicated last tenth, but let's say the 9/10, right? And let's not have domain admins lying around in every machine. And let's not have tons of shadow administrators, which might be in the environment. And these are things that can be fixed. So we should really pay attention to that with our expanded attack surface.
No, I think that's a great point, Ofer, and it's a great segue to the next topic, which is the topic of what does this new end-to-end secured stack for future collaboration look like? I know all three of you have touched on this topic, so obviously there's a lot of passion and energy comes from three of you. And frankly, many of our listeners and audio members here are CISOs, customers who are interested with the task of outlining what this end-to-end architecture looks like. So maybe Bret, I'll start with you because probably you have the best vantage point given Cisco plays across network, cloud, email, identity, application. We'll start with you, Bret, and just taking a stab at what does this end-to-end architecture, which takes us 9/10 of the mile that Ofer described, look like?
Yeah, absolutely. And Prasad, you already made some of the point. So where typically organizations start, especially over the last few months, is on secure remote worker in particular, right? And beginning there to say, okay, we have this big shift, people are out of the office, what do we need? So what are the typical technologies? Well, we talked about one, multi-factor, right? Multi-factor authentication. You have to have strong authentication, right? Get rid of passwords. What else do you need? Well, number two, you need really strong VPN-based, networking and the ability to establish trust from those devices to the services. So a lot of organizations had massive expansion of VPN access, right? That just get into those corporate assets that they used to do that because they were in the same network. Now they're outside. So massive expansion there. Another really important topic there is for all those users when they're not accessing the corporate resources, but they're going to the rest of the internet, being able to deal with risks there. So having some kind of protection of outbound traffic. So in our case, that's Umbrella, the secure internet gateway. But that's a way to make sure you're not going to evil sites, right? You're going to sites that have the appropriate reputation to minimize the chance of getting contaminated from a bad site and doing it according to policy. And then finally, you need to protect the device in terms of back to hygiene and with a good anti-malware technology that's going to sit on that device. In Cisco's case, that's advanced malware protection, AMP. So that's the start, right, is really focusing on that user and device. And exactly, Prasad, to your point, the other steps as you go from device, then you also leverage the network stack and the visibility of the traffic that traverses from that user and device to the ultimate destination. So you have the network infrastructure, all kinds of analytics in terms of packets and net flow and all that sort of thing. Then you have the whole cloud side, right? And the fact that we all recognize that a lot of the sensitive assets are sitting in AWS or Google or Azure or elsewhere, right? And so you have a whole bunch of security infrastructure required for the cloud. And then finally, the application stack itself, right? And how do those organizations build secure applications and protect the data? So really to the point, and I think the lesson we've learned over and over again is that security is never one single component, never one single particular technology, but to span across endpoint, network, cloud, application, pull both visibility and telemetry together, and then enforce policies that work end to end. And that's ultimately that architecture.
Yeah, it's that unified security stack where each pieces are talking to one another and exchanging telemetry. Tom, just taking off from what Bret just articulated, I'm sure you're getting a lot of, I would say, inbound requests from customers as regards to Zoom bombing and other collaboration tool attacks. So you guys do a very good job of surfacing what's on the open web and dark web and bringing that to customers' attention. Do you also position yourself playing an advocacy role where you're advising customers on the basic environment they need to create or harden to prevent these attacks in future, or is it more, or do you see yourself anchored more on the reporting side?
Yeah, great question. And it's really a mixture of both. I think a lot of where we help organizations understand what's being talked about is we're in a lot of these communities, and with the automated collections, you can actually see what people are talking about, what technologies these actors are interested in, which CVE that's been recently released are people working exploits for. And this really helps the vulnerability management teams really prioritize where they're going to focus their efforts. And this is one where it's something from the outside where you're looking into some of these communities, and just the mere fact that they're talking about this, it can help you really escalate some of the patching. We also look at this where there's also employees on a lot of these locations as well. Telegram is really, I call it the wild, wild west. It's kind of the new place where everything is being talked about, whether it's your favorite sports team or if you want to learn how to do carding operations. It's really, there's a channel for everyone there. And we've seen even within there are a lot of employees that may be on there. We see a lot of solicitation for people working in the mobile carriers, where there's a lot of solicitation because threat actors want to hijack those mobile phone numbers. And if you can get an insider that can help you do SIM hijacking, that's a gold mine for there. So these are the types of things where our collection can kind of help understand what people outside your network are talking about. And then also, if you know there are certain locations where your employees go quite often, this is sometimes another good insight as to potentially some of the threats that you can warn them about when they enter into some of these communities.
A lot of validity to what you just postulated, Tom. I think, which is also a follow-up to my next question. And Bret and Ofer, I want you guys to share your thoughts on this. So like Bret mentioned, we need this unifying end-to-end stack spanning network, cloud, endpoint, identity, applications. Would love to get your perspective on, I'm sure we all agree that no one platform or vendor can do it all. So would love to get your perspective on the partnership opportunities among large cap platforms like Cisco and best-in-class companies such as Illusive and Flashpoint. I mean, where are the partnership opportunities, and how can we strengthen this partnership even stronger going forward?
Yeah, to that point, as you say, Prasad, if we've learned anything, security is never solved, never addressed by any single one technology or one vendor. That's just true. Despite what some of our sales force would like to be true, the fact is it's a good thing to have diversity. It's a very good thing. And what we've seen is if you over-rotate on any one particular source, you're likely to, number one, miss things, and number two, get false positives in terms of alarms that aren't true alarms. And as any good security analyst will tell you that works in any security operations center, I mean, if you have too many false positives, you're dead. You just get overwhelmed, and then it's just useless. So to me, the primary value of partnerships has to do with pulling that diversity of telemetry in that becomes very complementary, right? Number one, it avoids blind spots, so you're much more likely to see across those areas that any one particular technology is going to miss. And number two, it's likely to be complementary, so where different viewpoints, where you see the same attack, the same issues, that's an emphasis that is really, really important. So that's why I think virtually every customer looks for that diversity, especially in this area around insider threat, which is oftentimes very very subtle, right, and challenging to be able to detect and stop.
I know this panel is about securing future of work. At the same time, each of us has a role to play in enabling a brighter future altogether. And I say that because all three of you guys are seen as successful leaders and you're role models to many in the space of cybersecurity. Today, we are at a very delicate point where there is a lot of attention, as it rightly should be, on diversity and inclusion. And cybersecurity is one space that, if you were to be brutally honest, it's one industry that probably has lagged in really promoting D&I. And it probably there are many factors that we cannot address, but there are some that we could address. Would love to get each of your perspectives, starting with you, Ofer, on how you think about D&I in cybersecurity and what can each of us do to really promote that cause.
Yeah, to your point, I think within cybersecurity, diversity and inclusion is rough, and that's very unfortunate. I can tell you that at least within Illusive, we put this as a major emphasis in the organization, and I can't overstate how troubling it is to get to diversity and inclusion within cyber, and I think that's a very bad state that we're in, I think, as a world, and I think we have to change it. I don't think there is an easy button here. I think the only way to do it is just to have it top of mind and make sure that you put a lot of attention on it. As in with everything, it's repeating the message clearly and many, many times, right? And ensuring that it's in everybody's mind in the company and everybody understands that we're all about equal opportunities and we're all about including as many different opinions, people, thoughts, cultures, and so on and so forth. So over time, I am hopeful that things will change as an industry. I think it will get there, but I think there's a long way to go.
So maybe I'll jump in here. So Prasad, as you know, Cisco has a massive focus around diversity and inclusion, right? It's a big, big focus, and certainly within the security group in particular. I think part of it is great, unbiased hiring practices, but as Ofer pointed out, I mean, this is a long-term issue. You can't just, especially in cybersecurity, there just aren't necessarily those candidates to hire. So a lot of our focus has been on building that pipeline. So those folks are available to hire in the first place, and that takes years of investment. It seems like forever ago now, but I last year attended the Grace Hopper Conference, which is the world's biggest tech conference specifically for women. Amazing event and a huge focus on cybersecurity there, and aggressive recruiting around the women cybersecurity candidates as a case in point to build
That's great
that
to
up,
hear.
and a lot of work there.
Fantastic data point. Yeah,
it's an awesome event. The other things we're doing too, to the point, is working in all kinds of different training and outreach, and even things like cybersecurity clubs at the elementary school level, even, and looking at communities that may be disadvantaged and don't necessarily have that focus. So whether it's at the elementary school level, the high school level, outreach with universities, that takes a lot of investment, and it's certainly been a focus within Cisco for a long time.
At Flashpoint, it's been interesting because a lot of the needs that we have, it really is to cover a lot of different languages. Our team, we cover 25 different languages fluently, and it has really forced us to really broaden our hiring of where we go look for individuals. And the one thing that I know we're definitely committed to that, but it's also having a training pipeline for people that are not from the traditional cybersecurity backgrounds, and how can you help bring people in and give them that training and really help them build a career. And I think that's another critical part as we move forward, which is looking at how our companies not only just committing to hiring, but then how do you train and grow someone within this industry. And there's plenty of positions there, and we've definitely seen that really that diversity and unique experiences and backgrounds have really improved our overall support, and really has just brought a lot of unique ideas and approaches that the traditional way of doing things would not have really brought to the forefront. So we're definitely committed to keeping that going as well here at Flashpoint.
Jumping in here, back to your question about the partnership with Cisco and why we're excited about it. So as you may know, in Israel, we do like high school screening to bring people into the cyber realm, into the IDF. And off of Bret's comment, you guys go to the elementary school. This is what I mean. Cisco has a reach and an ability to influence, which is absolutely phenomenal. It's pretty cool.
No, I would say these are great positive data points and success stories in some instances that we should amplify. Hopefully 3 years from now, we're doing a similar panel, and the topic of the panel would be how cybersecurity achieved good D&I in the industry. That'll be a great milestone for all of us. This has been a great conversation, panelists. I mean, I know you guys carved a really important time for this topic. Really appreciate it. I could go on and on and on, but I know we're coming towards the end of our allotted time. But before we end this panel, would love to get from each of you, would love to hear about the one or two innovation that you're super excited about and optimistic about when it comes to securing future of work. So maybe we'll start with Tom, Ofer, and then end with Bret, if that's all right.
Yeah, I always love these questions. This is one where it gives you an opportunity to really look at those technologies that people are just talking about right now and kind of think through kind of how this can play out in a good way. And the last couple of months where we've seen all these discussions about the need to track people and where they've been moving and just how technology can really support that. And there's been a lot of people that have been worried about the privacy implications that come along with some of the contact tracing. On the flip side, I also look at this, and what excites me is a lot of the technologies that are coming out that really build in anonymity and build in security into a lot of these applications that are being discussed. And I think that's going to be a unique thing to watch, which is how people can really take control over their digital assets and their digital profiles, and really control who gets to see their information and what happens with it. So that's going to be an interesting one that I will keep an eye
on. For me, what's exciting is I think also on the security front and also on every other front, on the business front, I think this massive pandemic and financial crisis and all that drives everybody to kind of return to the basics. And I think this is a time when we're coming off of a period with huge surges in the market, and maybe also overspending, overdoing, and so on and so forth. And now people are honing in on what actually works, right? Because they have to do more with less. And that's pretty exciting to me, because I think this is the time that will drive very strongly the approaches and the companies that actually provide the benefits and provide the value and are able to get their customers to the next step. And maybe some of the more nicer things but that haven't really played out all that well will kind of fall off the chart. So I think it's all about, ease of consumption, ease of operation of tools, and being able to adapt very, very quickly. Not, long, heavy cycles, but things that can adapt and move alongside our workforce and work methods that are changing every day.
Yeah, so I started this conversation saying how impossible it was to predict the future, but you have to anyway, so we all try. And of course, the big question that everybody is asking is, what is this new normal? What's the new normal, right? This is the classic buzzword these days. And I would say the consensus is, whatever this new normal is, it isn't going to look like the last one. It is clearly there are some major changes happening now, and we're not going to go back to the way it was just a few months ago. An example is that Facebook recently announced that up to half of their workforce is going to stay remote over the next few years, right? So there are a bunch of people that may never come back to the office, right? So you have these trends of, as we started at the beginning, just this continued acceleration of distributed workforce, just pushing the trends that we talked about. I think that's pretty clear. The other trend, certainly I and my team are looking a lot at, is as part of this and as part of the continued migration from on-prem infrastructure to the cloud, security has to move with it. And so there's a lot of changes afoot in the cybersecurity space. And in particular, this whole area of application and workload security, and how do we embed security into the development process, and as we build a whole software supply chain out of the way applications and data are protected, as that continues to evolve, I think that's going to be where a lot of the action of cybersecurity is over the next several years.
Awesome. Hey, Bret, Ofer, and Tom, you guys shared some really great pearls of wisdom over the last 40 minutes or so. I think what's clear, like Bret mentioned, it's difficult to predict the future, but what's really clear is that we are faced with a future where we have more unsolved problems than solved problems, and that's what personally gets me pumped up every day. So thanks once again for making time. Really appreciate it. Hopefully our viewers also enjoyed this conversation. And I would like to also thank the organizing committee, the portfolio development team for putting this together. Thank you.